I don't think a lot of people realize how much sacrifice it takes to be in a role of ministry.
Welcome back to Listen to the Helpers, a podcast created by the Fred Rogers Institute to elevate the voices of helpers everywhere. Fred Rogers once said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" Today we're joined by Dr. Clarence E. Wright, the Fred Rogers Institute and Pittsburgh Theological Seminary's Fellow in Theology and Ministry. At the end of this episode, stay tuned as Kenzie and I reflect on our conversation with Clarence in the context of Fred Rogers' legacy and our own work at the Fred Rogers Institute. So, Clarence, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We're so thankful to have you. To start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure, that's a loaded question because I do a lot. I'm fortunate to wear many hats, but I I I consider myself a lot of times when you're in ministry, there's something called bivocational or multivocational. I really consider myself to have a single vocation, which is service and ministry. But scholarship comes under that, missions comes under that, pastoral ministry, all of it runs together. So all that to say, I'm the pastor of the Love Zion Baptist Church, which is located in North Philadelphia. I live in South Jersey with my family. I have three children. My oldest is a sophomore in college, and I have everybody just had birthdays. So I do know how old my kids are, but I'm trying to keep up. So
Yeah.
my youngest just turned 9, and my middle child just turned 11. So my family, my wife and children are really central in my life, and along with my church, my ministry. I'm the president of Missio Seminary, which is part of Kairos University, and that is part of the scholarship portion of my life as a scholar practitioner. So I do ministry as a pastor, but I also am a scholar of practical theology. So I teach in graduate level courses. I mentor students, and of course, what has brought me here to the Fred Rogers Institute is I'm in my second year of a fellowship studying the theology of Fred Rogers, which is really the passion of my life. I really that's I I'm fortunate in every calling that I walk in, but this fellowship has been a blessing because it's allowed me to explore something I'm very passionate about, which is um, the impact of Fred Rogers, but also just the notion of communal theology, a theology of neighborhood, which I really believe that Fred Rogers exemplified. So I'm in the process of writing a book about the impact of Fred Rogers, and it's as it takes shape, it's taking a lot of different directions, and it's really it was rooted in theology, but it's really touching on a lot of sociological issues as well. Fred Rogers' impact on race relations, gender inclusiveness. There are so many ways that he made an impact on multiple generations. So I'm exploring all of that, and it's just a wonderful journey to see how all that is coming together.
And we've been so excited to be a part of that journey and all that you're doing. And you're so right that you do so much and you wear so many hats. And even Kenzie and I were talking about before we started this conversation about that first question of asking you to just share what you do. Kenzie and I were like, I don't even know what he's gonna say because he does so much. Like, what isn't he going to share that he does? And I'm so glad that you talked a little bit about your fellowship too. Can you talk a little bit about how your study of Fred in the Fred Rogers Archive has influenced your work in ministry? We know that you're, obviously taking that into your work in your book and all of the other things that you're doing on like the scholarly end of it. But how has that experience so far influenced like your work in ministry or even your work in, with the students that you mentor or even in your family, just like kind of the in practice things?
Yeah, it's it's been fascinating. And I was really interested in uh, the life and theology of Fred Rogers even before I started this fellowship. I was, teaching, I teach a course called Community and Mission that really centers on how we live out our faith in the public square. And a good portion of that course, really for the last 5 or 6 years, has has been centered on what I've called the incarnational ministry of Fred Rogers. So what this fellowship has done is it's given me an opportunity to go deeper and find things that I wouldn't have found before. I had books that are already published about him, and just my recollection of growing up as a child watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But what this fellowship has done is allow me to look into the other side, and that includes um, just fascinating things like handwritten notes, not just the actual television program and the episodes or the songs that came, but also going into the creative process that led to it, um, the um, the psychological aspect of his work with Dr. McFarland, and yeah, it's just seeing the process behind the process and understanding how deliberate everything was that he did has really been helpful for me. It's also opened my eyes. Like I think I'm a better parent. Like I've always tried to be a good parent, but spending a couple years immersed in the life of Fred Rogers will help in times of patience, and when the mad that you feel starts to starts to rise up. It helps you to have creative outlets, but it's also helped me to communicate that. And I really have found that the the lessons of Fred Rogers are, they were directed at early childhood, but they're really universal. The same principles that he taught to me as a toddler, I can apply to my life as an adult. I can teach to my 9-year-old or my 11-year-old or my college student. All of it is continues to be relevant and applicable. And it's just been wonderful researching it and really getting a better grasp on what are the larger implications of it.
That's so true that there are so many larger implications, and I love what you said about your time really focusing on Fred's work and Fred's legacy has like felt you be like a more like maybe a better parent, but maybe just looking at things in a different way. And I feel like I can definitely relate to that. My son is 1.5, and I feel like the fact that I worked, I was a student involved in the Fred Rogers Institute's work, and then I worked here for a few years and then became a parent. I feel like I feel the same way, like being kind of grounded in Fred and being around his work so often kind of helped prepare me for parenthood in a way that I didn't expect. And
Yeah,
especially what you said about patience really, really was resonating
absolutely.
with having a
It's a
toddler.
lesson we can all use.
Yes. Yeah. So I really appreciated that you pointed that out.
Yeah, I agree. Just like again, going back to being an adult, what you had said, Clarence, like there's sometimes I'm known for being very slow by nature, especially in the morning, and I'll be like, I like to take my time. Like I'll sing to myself. I'm like, okay, yeah, everything that, many things and values that Fred taught us just applies now, even in adulthood. But
It's
I,
funny. It's funny you say that because that is one of the early. That's one of the things that really convicted me early on when I started, you know, researching Fred Rogers in earnest. Like the first month or so of my fellowship when it began last year, or year before last. Um, I I do a lot. My life is busy. I wear a lot of hats, which means I have learned how to be quick and efficient. I've learned how to get it done. I've learned how to do things at a rapid pace. And I was convicted in studying Fred Rogers that this is completely antithetical to his ethos. And so I had to learn to slow down. And the first thing I did was in a lot of readings, I like multi-immersive reading. So I like to listen to an Audible or podcast setting like this, as well as reading the text. And when I'm listening, because I drive a lot in my car, I I always speed it up. On Audible,
Mhm.
where you can
Yep.
and and typically 1.5 is my ideal speed. It's a time and a half faster than what the reader is actually reading it. And I was reading one of the books about Fred Rogers' life, or listening to it on Audible, and I had it up to 1.5, and I was just like, this just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. And I think they actually the author actually got to the point where they were talking about his slow pace, and I said, I gotta I gotta stop this. So I stopped and I readjusted it back to the standard pace, and I took my time to soak it in. And that's one of those lessons of Fred Wright. Now I'm still trying to get things done. I'm still more like the speedy delivery man than Fred Rogers. Uh, but it's a lesson that sometimes just slowing things down can be um, really beneficial to life and lots of other things.
And that's so hard to remember too. And like we live in such a busy, fast-paced world, and especially with like, I don't know, all of the it seems like everybody is like, how efficient can we do things? And while yes, that's great, it is so important and valuable to slow down, and you're right, it's hard to remind yourself of that, especially when you're like quick by nature. And it sounds like Kenzie doesn't have that problem. She is like, I love slowing down. I definitely default to the let's go quick, and I like, even like, I'm known to be a fast walker too. Like when people, I feel like Kenzie can probably attest to this, if we have to walk somewhere on campus to like pick up the mail, I'm like speeding up the hill. And I'm like, oh, sorry. Everybody else is like out of breath by the time we get there. And I'm like, let's go, go, go. Here we go. And I need to remind myself of that too. It's so important to be able to slow down, even if it's just a moment here and there, even if it's not like, let me change my whole way of living, but just like to have those moments like you explained with your listening to your audiobooks of maybe I can listen to it at the normal speed and just take my time and really soak it in and enjoy it.
Yeah, I walk slow, but I talk fast. I still need to work on not talking as fast. That is something I'm trying to work on. But kind of backtracking a little bit in talking about the many hats that you wear, what inspired you overall to go down the path that you're on now? Like, why do you do what you do?
That's a great question. Well, I'll first say, as a pastor and a ministry practitioner, it's a calling. It's really a calling on my life. I, there were a lot of directions I could have went, but I really believe this one was the one that was ordained by God. I have an extensive call narrative. I won't I won't tell you the whole story today, but I began preaching when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
I was licensed as a minister at 16. I went, I went to Temple University, which is what brought me to Philadelphia. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. That's my hometown. And I came to Philadelphia to go to Temple University, and I tried just about everything my freshman year. I was going to go to the business school. I was going to be an architect. There was all kind of things. And then ultimately, it just came back to my core calling, and I ended up transferring to the Department of Religion and Urban Studies. And a lot of people I went to college with have changed careers many times, but almost 25 years after I graduated college, I'm still hyper focused on religion and uh, the study of community and how they work together. Which is why studying Fred Rogers is such a natural fit, because he was an ordained minister, but he was focused on the neighborhood, the concept of the neighborhood, a neighborhood ethic of care. So it's really always been who I am. I've always been fascinated with cities and neighborhoods. When I was uh, when I was 8 or 9, I could rattle off the top 10 cities in the country, and what their population was and what their demographics were. So I've always really been into geography and urban studies and the sociological aspects of neighborhood. I began my career after undergrad in community development. So I worked in some of the neighborhoods of Philadelphia with housing programs and economic development programs, and really working to revitalize some of the neighborhoods. And I did that work in Philadelphia and Wilmington, Delaware. And then I kind of was on a great trajectory career-wise, working in quasi-government organizations and nonprofits for community development. And then the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, when the housing crisis hit, that happened. And it really forced a dramatic shift in not only my career, but my perspective on a lot of things. I went from working with billionaire developers in Wilmington, Delaware, who were developing the downtown of Wilmington. Um, and After that job, I went and started managing a homeless service organization in Philadelphia. So I literally went from working with the top 1% wealthiest people in the country to working with those who had nothing and were coming to us just for meals. And that it really refocused me on away from the buildings in the neighborhood or the streetscapes in the neighborhood toward the people in the neighborhood. And that's the lesson that watching PBS taught us. When I was growing up, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street were back to back, and both of them were neighborhood-based shows.
Mhm.
So it, but the neighborhood was always focused on the people. It's the people. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, above all else, was a show about people. It was about real people, about make-believe people, uh, but ultimately it was about people. And the message was you cannot you cannot have a neighborhood without the people in the neighborhood. So that shift in my career around that 2009 time when there were things going on in the economy and I was thrust into a place to be of service to those who had the greatest need really changed my perspective and set me on a path toward more full-time ministry and service through the church that I pastor. I think it was uh, that was a season of preparation to get me ready to be effective as a pastor. Because if I came in to pastor a church in North Philadelphia with a mindset of uh, a big developer or a billionaire, it wouldn't translate to ministry in the best way. So I had I had to be broken all the way down to service at the ground level. Kind of like how I I use Fred Rogers' physical posture as a metaphor often. He was known to get down on the ground with the children and play with
Mhm.
them on the ground to get at their level. So in many ways, I had to learn how to come down to the ground and learn how to be of service to everyone who was of need. And that propelled me into ministry and that organization that I worked at in 2009 as I was a site manager of a homeless service location. And now I'm the chairman of the board of that organization. It's called Chosen 300 in Philadelphia. We have sites all through the Philadelphia region, but also that was a conduit uh, to do missions and service worldwide. We're not only are we feeding the homeless in Philadelphia, uh, uh, but we're also building wells for fresh water in Liberia and Nigeria. We have feeding programs in Guyana, South America. There's more than 20 locations of Chosen 300 worldwide now, where we're doing that kind of work to help those who are in need. So all of that is part of my journey. And then the most recent aspect of the journey is the academic side, where now I'm I'm taking my life experience and I'm teaching it to others.
You're also, aren't you in the process, and correct me if I'm wrong, of like also getting another master's degree as well? Like I know you are going back to school for something.
Yeah, another doctor, second doctorate.
Second
Oh,
doctorate.
wow.
Oh my gosh. Do
Yeah,
you want
I
to
have.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it actually it came kind of it coincides with the fellowship that I have. I have four earned degrees. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Religion and Urban Studies from Temple University. I have a Master of Arts in Missional Theology and a Master of Divinity from Missio Seminary, the school I'm president of now. I got two master's degrees when I was a student. And then I have a Doctor of Ministry from Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. Um, uh, Now I'm working on a PhD, a second doctorate from Hampton University, and that PhD is in public theology and community engagement, which is right in line with the life of Fred Rogers. So, I tell people I'm getting a doctorate in Mr. Rogers because even though the coursework they're not teaching me Mr. Rogers, I'm doing that research on my own, but I'm learning to put it in the framework of public theology, and I really believe Fred Rogers is one of the most impactful public theologians of the last century. So that's one of the things I'm trying to argue in this second doctorate.
That's so incredible. You have done so much and you do so much. And uh, two things. One, I love that you talked about the idea of meeting people where they are. I feel like that is so aligned with Fred's work and legacy. And we talk a lot about that in our work at the Fred Rogers Institute, this idea of meeting people where they are. And I love that that was a beautiful story of putting that into action of meeting people where they are and how you were able to get to that point of changing that perspective, changing that mindset with the shift of working with that top 1% of people all the way down to those in greatest need. And my second thing is you talked about slowing down and you're talking about all of these things that you do. How do you slow down? I'm genuinely curious because you do so much and it's such a high quality of what you do too. It's not like you're doing so much that it sacrifices the quality of your work or the quality of your relationships or the people that you serve. You're still doing all of these things really well. So how do you find the time to slow down and like take care of yourself and do like normal people things, I guess?
That's a great question, and I get asked all the time. This is what I say. It's multi-pronged. First of all, I believe what gets scheduled gets done, and I am very obsessive with my schedule down to the minute or the second. Um, and that includes things that normally would just happen naturally. If I wait for something to happen naturally, it won't happen. I have to schedule it. So, um, for instance, I have special time scheduled with all of my children individually
Mhm.
as well as collectively. Every Tuesday, if I'm in town, I take my son for Taco Tuesday. So I have Taco Tuesday with my son every Tuesday. Every Thursday, I have Shake Shack Thursday with my daughter. And my college kid is off doing college stuff, but once a month we have a lunch date where I will come in and have lunch. So just also being able to put my kids on the bus every morning when they go to school, to be there to get them off of the bus when they get off the bus. That's where the virtual environment helps, because so much of what I do is online. I'm able to do it from home if need be. Other than times when I'm traveling, I can do a lot of what I do from home. So that allows me to have the time with my children, which is very important. And I also have devotions with them before bed every night, and I've been doing that for their whole lives. So my kids cannot go to sleep if we don't have prayer, scripture, song, and a nighttime benediction. It's just something that we've programmed as part of our routine. So that really helps. The other thing, people assume because I do so much the question I always get is, wow, when do you sleep? You must never sleep. And it's actually the opposite. I get 8 good hours of sleep every night. And that's very important to me because I can't function throughout the day if I'm not recharged in that time at night. So I'm really serious about my sleep pattern and my rest. Um, but yeah, I schedule everything. Uh, I have up until recently, I had breakfast with my wife every morning. We would go to a diner and have breakfast every morning, but she got a new job in Delaware, which requires a commute. So we can only do breakfast one time a week now. But you know, but that's something else that I make sure is scheduled that we can have that time together. But the other thing besides scheduling is support. I could not do anything I do without the support of particularly of my family and of my church. I have I have the world's greatest wife, and she is very supportive of what I do and is able to work with me when we need to make shifts and make sure that the things are flowing the way they need to flow. Um, but I also have a supportive church. There are many churches that don't want their pastor out in the community doing stuff. They just want them to stay in the congregation and serve the people of that church. And that is the antithesis of public theology and incarnational ministry. Incarnation is the theological term that describes God coming to the earth uh, in the form of Jesus Christ and inhabiting the world. So an incarnational theology is one that goes into the world. It doesn't avoid the world, but it goes into the world. So my church understands that. They support me in my academic endeavors. They support me in my writing and my speaking and everything else that I do in addition to my work of the church. And we have structures in place at the church to make sure that is running smoothly as well. But that's really it: scheduling and support of those who matter the most. And for me, the ones who matter the most are my family and my church.
I feel like that speaks to what you were talking about earlier about the idea of a neighborhood. You have your own personal neighborhood, and that allows you to serve an even greater neighborhood. And I feel like the scheduling aspect of it, I feel like that's a great way to keep those moments really intentional because you are intentionally scheduling them and making sure that you have those times. And I love that idea of knowing everybody knowing like this is my time for my 9-year-old. This is my time for my 11-year-old. This is my time for my wife. This is my time for my church. I feel like that sounds like a great way to be able to divide your love and attention among all of the people who you want to serve and who you do serve. Um, you're clearly a helper in so many capacities at so many levels. You're no stranger to helping. And we're wondering what do you think it means to be a helper?
Yeah, that's another great question. Fred Rogers framed it as um, a helper, and look for the helpers, which he learned. I forget if it was his mother or his grandmother, but one of them really drilled that into him to always look for the helpers and to be a helper. Um, but for me, it the same notion is captured in the word servant. Ministry is another word for service. So dedicating my life to ministry means I am intentionally taking on the posture of a servant, whether it's uh, whether it's serving those who are members of my church and our congregation, whether it's serving those who are in the neighborhood, whether it's serving unhoused people through Chosen 300 Ministries, whether it's serving students who are looking to grow academically and ultimately go into the world themselves to be servants and helpers. It's all part of the same strain, which is how can I impact this world and leave it better than I found it. None of us can do everything, but but there is something small that all of us can do.
Mm.
And if you just keep doing that small thing over and over again, ultimately it makes a bigger difference. So helping people is the center of ministry. As a pastor, I'm called to help people. As as a scholar, as a professor, as a higher education administrator, all of those roles come together for the purpose of helping those in need. So whether it's helping uh, a village in Africa that needs fresh water, or whether it's helping families in North Philadelphia that need groceries, or whether it's just helping a family who is going through grief or trauma of some aspect in the ministry or in the church. It's all part of the same string, which is ministry.
No, that's amazing. I was actually just talking to Sarah yesterday during another podcast recording, that really to volunteer your time, it can really help someone, even if it's something small, like taking an hour out of your day to help like at a food pantry, like that gives someone a meal for like weeks.
Yeah.
It just is amazing how involved you can be even with the little amount of time you might have to do so. Kind of which leads me to my next point. In your work in ministry or even any of the other hats that you wear, is there anything that you wish people knew about what you do that they may not?
Yeah, I guess I wish people knew how much sacrifice it takes. I'm very conscious of, the bad image that pastors and preachers and religious figures get in the community. There's this notion that pastors are stealing money and living lives of luxury while the people are struggling. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much sacrifice it takes to be in a role of ministry. How uh, I'm consistently the top giver in my church. The reality is I give most of my salary as pastor back to support the ministry, to support the people, um, and that has been my experience. I'm also an ecumenical leader, so I hold office in my denomination, which is the Progressive National Baptist Convention. Which is, by the way, that's the convention that was founded to support the work of Martin Luther King. So our convention was founded in 1961 to support the civil rights work that Martin Luther King was doing. Um, and I'm an officer in the convention, and I hold local positions with pastors' conferences and other interreligious bodies. And my overwhelming experience is that so many of those who are working in ministry are doing it as a sacrifice. And a lot of times there's a spotlight on, mega church pastors. And I have nothing against mega church pastors. If you've grown a large congregation, that's wonderful. Thank God for that. But the overwhelming majority of those working in ministry are working in congregations of less than 200 people, who are making budget decisions, where we can best use the gifts that are given to the church to be a support for not only those in the church, but also those in the full community. And one thing Martin Luther King said often was that a budget is a moral document.
Mm.
Whether it's a church budget or a state or national budget, whether it's in politics, the nonprofit sector, or corporations, or even in personal finance, where you spend your money is a reflection on the morals that you have. And the overwhelming majority of those working in ministry, not just Christian churches like what I pastor, but also synagogues, mosques, and other faith bodies are working diligently to apply whatever gifts come into the ministry to go back out and serve those who are in need. So I wish people had a better understanding of that, and didn't make just snap judgments of, the image of the pastor driving a Rolls Royce and, living in a mansion and all that kind of stuff. That, that exists, but it's so small compared to those who are out there doing the work of ministry that, I wish people would understand how much it takes. And also just um, the legacy of faith on our society. There is so much in our world that would not be if it were not for the church or religious bodies. Most of our universities and colleges were founded by church bodies. Um, the Fred Rogers Institute is located at one of them.
Yes.
Most
Mhm.
of most of the hospitals
Mhm.
that existed because a church or religious body started them. And notably, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood existed because Fred Rogers was ordained by the presbytery of Pittsburgh to do ministry in the world. So sometimes you're experiencing the work of ministry, whether or not you're Christian or agnostic or atheist or of another faith. You have everyone has benefited from the work of ministry, whether it be through education, through hospitals, or in the case of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, through a children's television program that helps us understand the principles that are universal to our faiths.
That's so interesting. That's such an interesting perspective, and it's so true. And it speaks to how ministry can look so different for different people, for different locations, different neighborhoods, different denominations. Ministry is such a big word that can encompass so many different types of helping and serving. And that's so interesting to think about how there are so many ways that people are just going about their daily lives and benefiting from someone's ministry or some group's ministry. Um, that's really interesting. Also, what you said about a budget being a moral document, that's really sticking with me. How you said, where you spend your money is a reflection of your morals. That's also, I think that that's so true. And I've never really thought about it like that before. And that's also kind of making me think about like, but not only budgeting your money, but budgeting your time is also a
Yeah.
reflection of your morals. So that in itself is a moral document, quote unquote, even though your time isn't, something to write down. But um, making me think about how you explained your scheduling system and being intentional about everything. That's so clearly a reflection of your morals too, how you budget those aspects of your life. Um, and so in all of what you do, and across all of the years that you've been in this work of being a helper, being a servant, being in ministry, I'm sure there's been an ebb and flow and there's been ups and downs, good days and not as good days. Can you share a story, if anything comes to mind, of a time that you remembered your why and you remembered like, okay, this is why I do what I do. I'm sure that you have many moments, but is there one in particular that comes to mind about remembering your why?
Yeah, I think I talk about 2020. 2020 was hard for all of us, for so many reasons. Um, but it really was eye-opening to me the value of community, um, particularly my church community, because if you remember in the shutdown, most churches were not able to meet physically. There were various levels that we were able to continue the work of ministry. Um, some shut down completely. Some just recorded Zoom sessions like this. Um, my church, we elected to use a skeleton crew. So our sanctuaries fits about 300 people, and we did the calculations that to safely socially distant uh, uh, during the shutdown, our capacity was 8 people in the sanctuary.
Wow.
So um, so we shifted to an online platform, and we had our core group of 8 people, which was me, a couple musicians, a couple singers, a couple deacons, and the media team to make sure we could put everything out. And everyone else had to watch online. And it became the community shifted online, but I felt the weight of grief of not being able to gather with the people. Um, and also we experienced losses during the pandemic. We had several prominent members of our congregation passed away from COVID-19 in 2020. And to add insult to injury, we could not gather for the funeral services to celebrate the life of these people. So we had to our 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 traditions, our our gatherings, our liturgy, everything was disrupted in that season. And it was eye-opening for me because it showed me how valuable community is, how valuable the church as a body of people, our church family is. And I learned about myself that, so I've done personality tests and all that kind of stuff. I am very high on the introvert scale. I usually,
That's very surprising to me.
Yes.
yeah, most people are surprised by that, but a lot of clergy and people who speak publicly are actually introverts, and we're professional extroverts, so we
Mm,
know how to talk, but when it comes to being able to recharge, like I desperately need alone time,
mhm.
which is one of the reasons why I I take time to travel. Like this is a writing week for me, so I'm not home because I need solitude in order to really lock in for a few days on writing. But um, what I learned in 2020 was that I am an extrovert for about 2 hours every week, and that 2 hours is not during church, but as soon as the benediction is given and we let out of church. I pastor one of those churches where people don't like to go. They stick around and they fellowship, and we meet in the fellowship hall and we eat chicken and get a cheesesteak from the corner store, and just continue the fellowship. So sometimes the fellowship after worship is longer than the actual worship service was, because that's the time when we all connect and just spend time just talking, catching up on the week and everything like that. And during the pandemic, when we didn't have our full congregation, we just had our 8 core team, and even we were not getting close to each other with masks on. It just really showed me how valuable that time of connection is. So I have, since we've opened back up and got back into our, nothing is ever going to be like it was before the pandemic, but um, to since we've opened back up and allowed people to come in, and we've gotten back to our routine of fellowshipping after service. I like to say church begins at the benediction. It's been eye-opening to me how valuable that time with people is. So I like to tell people I'm an extrovert 2 hours a week. The rest of the week, I'll get by, and I know I'm not antisocial. I know how to talk, but my personality really is more on the introverted scale. But that time taught me the value of personal interaction and the building of community as a central aspect of my faith. Uh, we believe in Jesus. We worship. We sing. I preach. We do all of the things that you would expect from a religious body. But that year really, more than any other, illustrated to me how important we are to each other, and,
Mhm.
and that's neighborhood theology. That is what it means to the central message of Jesus was love God and love your neighbor. If we can figure that out, we'll do well in every other aspect.
That's so beautiful. And I'm a parishioner at the Basilica at St. Vincent, and I've noticed that the past maybe, I don't know, month, the past couple of weeks that my family has gone to mass, we we've had a hard time finding a seat, which is a good problem to have. And like specifically the past couple of weeks, we've gone in and every seat is full. And we've had to stand in the back, and some of the ushers are pulling out chairs from the fellowship area and putting chairs up and to make extra pews in the back, like last minute as mass is starting. And even the other day, one of the priests came back to help find people seats, like during the mass, was helping people find seats. And after we left, my husband and I were like, oh my gosh, like what, like it brought us so much joy to see so many people, and my
Yeah.
husband more so than me, but I would consider us to be on the more introverted scale as well. And we're not people who like search for a crowd or go out of our way to have extra social interaction on the regular. But leaving that like growing community, we were like, oh my goodness, like that was very like, I don't know, not like a normal reaction for us to be like, great, more people. But we had this feeling of what a beautiful thing that there were too many people in the church. And
Mm.
that I think is what you're explaining is like reminding me of that feeling of like how important community is, whether it's inside a church or outside a church or in the neighborhood, whatever neighborhood it is. We need other people, and it's important to be able to feel like you have a sense of community wherever you are, um, and whoever you are. Um, it's just such a beautiful and really necessary thing. Not only to have those times of solitude and like be by yourself, but also to know that you have a community there. Even just to know that it's there can make a world of difference.
Yeah, and also as a fellow introvert, I feel like I'm gonna need some tips on being a professional extrovert because I would have never guessed that you were an introvert at all, Clarence, because you're just so like you're just so well spoken, which I guess also adds to your job, but you're just incredibly well spoken, and I am so jealous as a fellow introvert. No, again, thank you so much today for coming on and joining us, Clarence. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just that the world needs more Fred Rogers, and
Mm.
if he lived out. I've been studying him deeply for almost 2 years, and I'm still looking for the negative stuff. Even the things that the rumors here and there of this and that. They're like, that's it. Like really? So, I would really encourage people just to look into his life and work. And I'm conscious that we're in a season now where there's a whole generation who was born after he passed away and never experienced the neighborhood. And this is the time when it's most important. The work of Fred Rogers Institute is most important right now for this generation to make sure that the message continues to live on. And there's hunger for it. There's I'm seeing Fred Rogers everywhere. Even in the Super Bowl, there were two different Fred
Mhm.
Rogers commercials from different companies that weren't related to each other at the Super Bowl. And I think the world is waking up in these polarized times when so many are at each other's throats. We need more Fred Rogers.
Mhm. That was beautiful. Thank you so much again for being a guest. Thank you for your continued work as a fellow with us. We are so happy to have you as a part of our neighborhood. And we so appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Okay, Sarah, what do you think about our conversation with Clarence?
That was really inspiring. I feel like we always learn so much more about the people that we have on this show, even if we know the person ahead of time. We've known Clarence for a while now, through his work as a fellow with us, but I just feel like getting the chance to actually sit down and have like an unstructured conversation with him. I learned so much more about him. I already thought he did so many things, and now I realize how much more he does. And yeah, it was just a really inspiring conversation. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I loved what he said, and correct me, but he said something about how many people within his like line of work consider themselves like multi-vocational, but he
Mhm.
considers himself like just what is it, vocational or singular vocational, and that he really focuses on his work in ministry and helping his community, which I thought was really beautiful. Because again, he does like he just wears so many hats. There's so many intricate parts to his job, um, and he does them all and he juggles all of them so well.
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising things to me that he said was that he started preaching at 16 years old. That's so young. And the fact that he's still doing and even though he said that when he went into college he tried out a couple of different, career paths and majors and he was testing some things out, but for the most part, from the time he was 16 all the way till now, he's still passionate about the same thing and is like serving for the same purpose. And I feel like that's just really incredible. Not a lot of 16-year-olds have the have the like motivation, the drive, the like being so sure about what they want to do and the difference that they want to make in the world to do something like that. That was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and also the fact that he's like just a lifelong learner, like
Mhm.
from being 16 and all of the degrees and learning that he's done and his doctorate in what is it, public theology.
Mhm.
It's just amazing. And even to also come to the archive and through his fellowship learn through Fred and how that applies to both his career and just him as a human being. I also thought that was really beautiful as well.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how, our fellowships are usually structured in a way that it's along the lines of, you have to we expect you to visit the archive and study and research with Emily a certain number of times or to produce a certain deliverable, and that might be the fine print of the fellowship, but Clarence is very much what you said, a lifelong learner, and that's so evident because he goes above and beyond just naturally, and he goes out of his way to say, I'm finding myself in need of another visit to the archive because this I have questions about, or this I'm still curious about. So I'm going to make an extra trip. And it's not because we're asking him to do that. It's not because we're expecting him to do that. It's because he just genuinely is curious and wants to learn more. And he wants to kind of better himself in all ways to be able to be of service to the people in his neighborhoods. And I just think that's really, really admirable.
Yeah, and he also goes out of his way to get involved in other initiatives that we
Mhm.
do. Like, for instance, I think about the Fred Rogers Scholars, obviously, and how he got to speak at our last induction ceremony.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
might I add that it was obviously wonderful because
It
it's
was
always wonderful when he talks.
amazing.
And everyone complimented him and like talked to us as well. Like, oh, like it was really nice to hear from Clarence because he just is so well spoken. And like he said, like he tests, like when he takes like personality tests, it comes back that he's an introvert. But like again, you could just never tell about
You
talking to
wouldn't
him.
know.
And it is really, I don't know, interesting to hear that he does need time to like recharge because I don't know, I also do, and I'm an introvert. And to hear the term like professional extrovert is also interesting
Yes,
too.
I thought that was a great term. I think we all should consider ourselves professional extroverts because
Yeah.
regardless of what we are outside of work or during our downtime, we have our times when we need to be on. So I think that's something to like add to a resume. Like I'm a
Mm.
professional expert. I was gonna say professional expert. I think it's something to add to a resume that we're professional extroverts.
Yeah. And not only that, but I really like kind of diving into the our conversation around fundamentals. I really like how he talked about solitude and how he, in order to be a professional I almost said expert too, extrovert, like you need to have time to be alone and
Mhm.
reflect and how he needs time to, I don't know, center himself, I guess
Yeah,
would be a
and like
great way to.
recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
No,
you think about any other fundamentals?
yeah, I was definitely thinking about solitude when he was talking about that as well. I was also thinking a lot about a sense of self-worth. There were several things that he said throughout that conversation that made me think of that, but thinking about his shift in, that 2008, 2009 time frame of figuring out how to meet people where they are, figuring out the necessity of meeting people where they are. Um, I feel like hearing him tell that story sounded like maybe he had a bit of a shift in how he viewed like his own place in the world around him, I guess. So maybe
Yeah.
that's a little bit of an extension of self-worth, but I feel like I feel like part of self-worth is like not only how you view yourself internally, but how you view yourself in relation to everything going on around you. And I think that story was a great kind of description and explanation of that change in how you view yourself and your place in the world and what you can do for those around you. and maybe what you can't do for those around you, the things that are out of your control. Um, Going from serving the top 1% of wealthy people and making the shift to serving those who are in experiencing homelessness and in a lot of need. That seems like it had such a big impact on him and how he viewed how he viewed his place in the world and what his kind of like purpose was moving forward. Um, Also hearing about related to what you were mentioning about like his time of recharging and taking care of himself in those, knowing that he needs those times of solitude and making sure that he gets a full 8 hours of sleep, making sure that he, pursues his curiosities and his passions and follows those callings. I feel like that all is like filling his cup in a way so that he can fill others, and taking care of himself so that he can take care of others. I think he seems to be very well aware that that's a really important aspect of being a helper is helping yourself first.
Yeah, and also, I guess in a way, trust comes up a little bit because he mentions that in order for him to be successful, he also needs those supports, like his family and his church.
Mhm.
Um, and again, that goes back into the idea of filling your cup because his family, not only does he assist in filling their cup, I'm sure with Taco Tuesday night
Yeah.
and spending once a month with one of his children, like um, having that time to give back to your like I go the bigger idea of the bigger neighborhood and then of course like the neighborhood of his family that's also super important too.
Mhm. I also keep thinking about, I know I even called this out when he said it, that it was sticking with me, but I keep thinking about how he mentioned that idea of a budget being a moral document and that being a reflection of, where you spend your money, and then how I talked about where you spend your time, those being a reflection of your morals. I think that's such an interesting concept to think about, and I think that's something that's really going to stick with me
Mhm.
because I think about we talked a little bit about being fast paced and slowing down and specifically thinking about that idea of budgeting your time and that being a reflection of your morals. I think personally that's going to be something that moving forward I start to think about more of like how am I spending my time and is this an accurate reflection of my morals and is this what I want to be an accurate reflection of my morals? Like am I spending the like appropriate amount of time intentionally with my family that I want to? And am I spending an appropriate amount of time, I don't know, scrolling on social media or is it too much?
Yeah.
Is that like not a reflection of how I want my morals to be? And yeah, same thing money wise. Like am I spending my money in a way that is reflecting who the person that I want to be and the people that I want to serve? Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I don't, that's like really sticking out to me from that conversation.
Oh my gosh, I think the same thing because I used to, going back to the idea of like volunteering, I used to volunteer a lot in high
Mhm.
school. Just not even for the sake of putting it on like my college applications, but I actually genuinely like to volunteer. And it's something that I've had less and less time for being in like undergrad and getting my master's and working at the same time. But now that I'm done with school, it's my goal of 2026 to start volunteering my time out in the community more, outside of work, even though we do a lot through our work as well, but just on my own. And I agree that is something that is going to stick with me, and I'm going to try to, as he said, like, sometimes you really just have to put it on your calendar to make sure that it
Mhm.
happens, even the little things, to actually like put something on my calendar that I can go help my community. So I'm with you there. It's going to stick with me too.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of your goals for 2026. And I think even if like we're not in a place that we can volunteer like a whole day or a whole afternoon, even like I don't know, we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but even small acts of kindness and small acts of service can actually be big things. Um, so thinking about spending our time in that way, I think is a good and needed mindset shift.
Yeah. Because it's like what Clarence said. Maybe the world just needs a little bit more Fred Rogers and his
Yeah,
values. And I think that is definitely one of Fred's values.
I love that. Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight from that conversation?
I don't think so. Thank you again, Clarence. That's going to be a conversation that's going to stick with us for the rest of the day, honestly.
I think for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. The Fred Rogers Institute advances the legacy of Fred Rogers by investing in the strengths of families and caring adults to support the healthy development of children. To learn more about the Fred Rogers Institute and our initiatives, visit fredrogersinstitute.org and follow the Fred Rogers Institute on Instagram, Facebook, and X.